Amy. Amy, I would love if you would protexter. Come on up. Oh my goodness, I love your history. Let me tell you a little bit about Amy. She is a history major who has always been fascinated by ideas. Isn't that cool? Humanities. And as such, she noticed the way a single idea can be expressed in different forms throughout the conduct, art, culture. I tell you, I love that, Amy. She has had an esteemed career. It led her to develop a leadership program at the University of Nebraska, and her career started in healthcare and then education, and now as the Senior Vice President, North American Marketing for Insight. She has branded for several times that company to now what we know and admire, Insight being a problem solver provider that puts the client first. Forgive me for editing that very impressive
You're
bio.
fine.
Amy, I give it right over to you. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you so much, Nancy, and welcome to all of you participating today. I know we have a great crowd and we have a really great panel for all of you. You know who I am after the introduction, so I'm just going to kick it right off, and I am going to ask one by one, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to ask them each, after they give a brief introduction, to tell us about a time when they felt included or excluded. Our panel really is about how do we break the bias? What are some strategies and what does that bias look like? How does it show up? So let's start with you, Hiba. Introduce yourself and tell us quickly about, you have an example of inclusion or exclusion?
Sure. Thank you, Amy, and hi, everybody. Great to be here, and thank you, Shetra, and the entire World Women in Cloud team for inviting me. So my name is Heba Ramzi, and I lead the citizenship effort here in Avanade. It's a joint venture between Accenture and Microsoft, a purpose-driven organization that focuses on making a genuine human impact in everything that we do with our clients, with our people, and in the community. So we are focused on IT. And prior to that, I've been with Microsoft for quite a number of years. That's a little bit about myself. So I give you an example around, around being inclusive. And to me, like if I think through the bias, to me, the gender bias has a lot to do with your culture and your upbringing and exposure. So I was born and raised in Egypt, where due to my culture, there is a stigma or a perception on, women being the weaker link. But possibly because of my upbringing, education, and my very enlightened parents, I never felt discriminated against. Maybe just to give you an example to illustrate that, there was an occasion where my father, who was in the medical expert, was invited to give a keynote speech to a large conference. And at that particular day, unfortunately, he lost his voice. And he turned around and asked me to, to read his speech on his behalf. That felt completely natural to me. And I felt very proud that my father would ask me and not my brother to give the speech there. And, that really meant quite a lot. I bring my whole self there. And, and I was very, very proud. This was a normal practice for me and in my family, but it was not a normal practice for everybody. So if I can just add one thing, to me, it all starts at home. It all starts, with your upbringing, and also have a role model to look up to, whether it's a male role model or a female. And in that situation, it was both my parents.
Great. Thank you so much, Hiba. What a great story. Lisa, let's go to you. Same thing. Introduce yourself.
Fantastic.
And tell us about a time you felt included or excluded.
Fantastic. I'm currently co-founder and president of MC3, which is a SaaS technology verifying social content. I've been a corporate executive, and a social and tech entrepreneur, and board director. I'll share an exclusion story. When I joined an executive team as the only woman of the company, in the first 2 months on Secretary's Day, which now is called Admin Day, someone left a cupcake on my desk, one of the other male executives. So I picked up the cupcake and I returned it. I know who put it on my desk because he was very unhappy that I was at the same level as him, even though I offered more or the same value as him. And then subsequently, there were other issues with sexist comments, sports, sitting in meetings, and everyone just talking about basketball or baseball. And I just made it a point saying, you can't talk like that. And, this very exclusionary, the company's values are about inclusion, and this is very exclusionary. So those are, excuse me. I was just speaking at another conference. I don't have COVID.
Thanks, Lisa. Carmen, let's go to you next.
Hello, everyone all over the world. I'm Carmen Isario, the president and founder of Elian International. Elian International is a technology and marketing company. We are proud sponsors and members of Women in the Cloud, and we also graduated from the Microsoft Cloud Accelerator program with WIC. And I'm going to share a story on inclusion. I can identify with the ladies that just spoke. So my story goes back to when I was a practicing professional. I started my career in the 70s. So you ladies can imagine back then there was hardly any women in the field. But my story was about this one time where our manager, we would always have monthly meetings and they would talk about upcoming projects. And there was this major project that was very complicated. And everybody in the group was complaining. And there was probably a couple of us women there. But I volunteered to do it and lead it. And so it was a very bold and courageous move because sometimes you don't know what that's going to look like or what kind of challenges you're going to have. But I was very successful after, we implemented the system. And I gained the respect of my peers, which was primarily men. They used to come and say, hey, I'm so glad you're doing that, when it was a rather long project too. It was almost a year. So I think that volunteering, even though when you're not totally in your comfort zone, is a way of gaining inclusion. And I want to illustrate that with sharing something about a movie. I'm sure a lot of you in the audience may have seen Hidden Figures. And I'm sure that movie resonates with all of us women who have been in IT. And so there is, and for those around the world, that movie, the theme of the movie is about these African-American women who were instrumental in the NASA program that launched the astronauts into space in the 60s and later in the early 70s. So there's the scene where Katherine Johnson, a brilliant African-American mathematician, there's this huge board that goes up to the ceiling, and she's sitting in the room with all her male counterparts, and everybody's a male there. And they were trying to resolve, the math in terms of the launching and all kinds of math solutions. And she steps up from her desk, grabs a chalk, walks to the board and starts climbing the ladder and starts writing the solution, the math formula and solution. And so when I think about that, that was such a powerful scene. I think of us women, how we need to be bold, be courageous, stand up, and start climbing the ladder. And that's what this conference is all about.
Yeah. Thank you, Carmen. Great analogy to that wonderful movie. Definitely a must see. And now, last but certainly not least, Erica, please tell us about yourself and tell us a story about inclusion or exclusion.
Great. So Erica Van Noord and I lead talent acquisition and employee experience here at SoftChoice. We're a technology solution and services provider and partner. And the story I have, I come from the business side of technology. I actually don't have a background in HR. And coming out of the business side, I spent a lot of times as a subject matter expert that would really help organizations translate business requirements into technical requirements. And I would often go out as a subject matter expert on that translation dialogue with our sales teams. And I remember walking into a meeting, it was in Philadelphia, and I was the only female in the room. So there was myself and 2 male colleagues, and there was the chief information officer and 2 male colleagues. And the questions that were coming, they weren't asking questions of me. I was answering the questions, but the questions kept coming to the men on my team. And I just found it really, really interesting, to the point where I actually stopped and I actually said, so you do understand that I get that you're directing the questions to my colleagues, but the reality is I was brought here as the person to help you through this. So if you don't mind, like, it's okay for us to dialogue directly. I sort of feel like there's a translation point in the room. And it was really interesting because I don't think they'd ever thought of it either. But that was my story of exclusion, which I actually feel I helped them to pivot, maybe that they might have been a little more inclusive on their next meeting where a female might have been in the room.
Yeah, that is a great story. I can relate there. As a young professional, I went to my first conference and I worked at a Department of Transportation. So it was a lot of engineers and those were, again, primarily men. And I happened to be able to take my husband with me. So at the opening reception, everyone kept coming up and introducing themselves to him and not me. And so, I totally empathize with your story, because I think that's probably happened to all of us in some situation or another where we've not been taken seriously. So, when we think about bias, I think there's several different kinds of bias that can sort of present themselves. There's things like confirmation bias, affinity bias, conservatism bias, and fundamental attribution error. Those are very technical terms, but I think we all know what exclusion feels like. Maybe you could each just take a moment and say, use some words to describe what inclusion feels like, those times when you've been included, and how does that make you feel when you feel that inclusive situation in a professional setting. Erica, let's start with you since we ended with you last time.
Yeah, so when I think of bias in general, there's sort of that conscious, unconscious piece, and I think a lot of it is environmental. To feel included, I would say, is where I may not feel that I'm spending as much time on being equal in the room, but I'm spending just as much time being a contributor. So I'm not spending energy on that, here I am and I'm equal. But when I think about overall, how it feels to be included, it feels welcoming. It feels like you're part of something. You feel the respect coming back that you're putting out there. And I would say overall, I don't feel as drained. Yeah. I feel more energized when I'm included.
That's a great way to put it. Heba, let's hear what your perspective is.
I think when you are included, you feel confident. You bring your whole self to the table. You become more innovative, more engaged, and it enriches the discussion, the work, the solution, depending on what you are doing. It is very important, otherwise you will be, undermined. So you will start thinking of, how can I address that? How can I prove myself? So you're always running, running to prove yourself. You don't need, because you are there you're sitting on the table. So you bring your whole self. So the inclusion really helps the organization, help yourself to grow, and it helps the organization to achieve their mission and objective, because you bring the best out of you.
Yeah, totally agree. Lisa, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I would say validation, feeling much more empowered, and then, it's way more fun and collaboration. You get, like Erica mentioned, it's very draining when you sit in a meeting and people don't respect each other and So you're able to just get into the work or into the goals, and what you're doing is just much more meaningful and fun, and everyone feels more valued in general, and makes for a much better workplace and experience, whatever you're working on.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Carmen, what about you? Tell us your thoughts.
I think that being included really, really addresses the trust factor, that we can all work. Let's say it's a team of people, we can all work as a team, we can trust each other. If we can trust each other, we can really accomplish a lot. It makes you feel confident. And to me, it makes me feel like anything that comes out towards my way, I can overcome any obstacles.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, all of your observations around energy and, is it adding energy or is it taking away? I think that's a really great observation. And I think just generally as women, I think we are more willing to sort of look around the room and be inclusive, whatever that means. Even if it's, you're the only woman in the room, I feel like we're still thinking about how do we all come together to sort of solve this, whatever the challenge is. I guess, final question, we have a few more minutes. I would love to hear, strategies that each of you maybe employ to drive inclusion in the settings that you're in. So one of the things that I've read a little bit about is like designating an inclusive ninja, meaning somebody's job it is to come into the meeting and really be the one that's kind of watching out and drawing people into the conversation when maybe they're not feeling like they have the opportunity to contribute. So I'll just kind of go around again, and I'd love to hear a strategy, a suggestion as we all work to break the bias that we so often feel. What are some things that each of you could recommend to our participants today that would really be helpful? So Carmen, let's start with you.
I want to make sure that whenever I'm in a team, that I can share, let's say it's about a particular subject or project, that everybody's in the know. And, because I run a company, I have to apply it differently. So I create inclusion for my employees by way of sharing all information, and also making sure that folks participate. And by creating that diverse workforce is another way of really generating inclusion and diverse ideas. And so for the past 25 years, since I've been in business, that's how I applied inclusion.
Great. Thank you, Carmen. Erica, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, if I think about the world we're living in today, and it's very much hybrid and remote, so we've got people in offices as well as people remotely. If I was having a meeting, I would encourage people at the beginning that, any comments, use the chat so that you're pulling people up. Not everybody wants to speak up. So how do you do that in a way where everybody would be comfortable? It's a level playing field. The other is if I'm leading a meeting and I'm at the end, we're summarizing actions and that sort of thing. One of the things I often do is I will go around and I'm always taking copious notes, and I will say, and Lisa mentioned this, so we're going to follow up on that. And Carmen shared this, and Sophie in the chat shared this, and Paul shared this. Because when people feel that when they hear their name, first of all, they perk up. So there's a natural feeling of being included. And if you actually comment or cite something that they said, they feel as though they've actually been heard and that others are feeling that it resonates. So just 2 tricks on the opening and closing, and I find it really helpful.
Great. Very good suggestions. Lisa, how about you?
Sure. I try to do my best in terms of empowering other women. I think women tend to have more imposter syndrome than men, even though women are often way more qualified than the other men, and you don't hear them question whether their ability to do their work. So when I hear that of a woman who are doubting their abilities or why they're there, really building them up in terms of, they are providing incredible value and their talent, and I think anytime we could build up other women is incredibly important in making sure in meetings they are included and valued. I also have served on equity task forces for organizations to ensure that boards and that the policies moving forward reflect the communities. So on a higher level, and then I'm also on a broader level trying to work on policy, both statewide and nationally, around providing empowerment access for women in small businesses as well as technology on a policy level, so that we're not left out of the board level on a public or private board. So those are my day-to-day things.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to invite Chai back up to the stage. And as we go to Hiba as our kind of last presenter on this thought, because I actually have to catch a flight. So I'm going to sign off. But the good news is I'm flying back to our headquarters city of Phoenix to have dinner with our new CIO. And that CIO is a woman. So we are getting a woman CIO. We have a woman CFO globally. We have a woman CEO. And so I'm not going to miss that celebration. So I thank you all today for being able to participate. And Chai, thank you for concluding for me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Yeah, thank you, Amy. A couple of thoughts from me. I think it has to be part of the commitment of the leadership. Everybody has to have, like a commitment around creating a diverse workforce, a diverse workplace. That is very critical. Also, I think, Chetra, you mentioned that and referenced the ESG. As a company, we have this as a target. We've got it as part of our ESG. One of our KPIs is around diversity and inclusion. Have a diverse workforce and also a diverse leadership. And that is very important. It's not only to look at numbers, it is about the accountability. So these are two critical things, and it becomes, like the agenda of everybody. It's not one person. And I'm very proud that we have a CEO who's a female. We've got 41% of our leadership are female, and also about 50% of our board are female. So we're very, very proud with that. But we need to continue with the journey and ensure that this is, all the workplace is very inclusive and everybody's respected. Thank you.
Perfect. First is thank you, ladies. What a great stories. And I think I learned a lot. Couple of things is it's a collective responsibility. It's not an individual responsibility. And each one of you sharing the stories was absolutely real. Like I could see a couple of areas where I've faced it. And I'm like, yeah, I could have done it a little bit differently of how I would have handled. Again, I would say is from a collective community perspective, this is a topic we will be talking about. And before we wrap up, I would like to ask the community is, what is that one takeaway you took, or what are some idea you took? Please share it with us. Connect with all the panel speakers during the networking time. And again, Hiba, Lisa, Carmen, Erica, thank you so much for educating us and really sharing the strategy so we are stronger together and we show up as leaders to create the change that we want. Thank you again for being here on the panel today.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
So amazing. I am humbled. I want to be an inclusivity ninja. How cool is that, right? And Erica, I love your idea of wrapping up the notes at the end of the meeting. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Omar. You're the contributions of everyone that just collaborated. What a wonderful thing to do.